Okay, I think we're gonna get started. Welcome to Oil Changes 2025 year-end supporter briefing, where we're going to talk about the legacy of the Ogoni Nine, Oil Change International, and activism in Nigeria today. I'm Elizabeth Best. I'm the executive director at Oil Change International, and we're really glad that you could join us today. We thank you all for the different ways in which you support climate justice and oil change in particular. Again, please introduce yourself in the chat to say hello. I think we have several staff and board members here as well, so please say hi and introduce yourselves. Um, and today's webinar is focused on activism around the oil industry, and we're going to touch on some of what has moved several lifelong activists to commit their careers to this work. So please let us know what inspires you to action. So as many of you know, 30 years ago last week on November 10th, 1995, 9 Ogoni leaders in Nigeria, including Ken Saro-Wiwa, were executed by the Nigerian government on trumped-up charges. It was clear that they were killed because of their increasing effectiveness and their campaign to fight shell oil's extraction and pollution on their lands. And this was a really awful instance and event, but this injustice has inspired a huge number of individuals, campaigns, and organizations to continue the fight against corruption and the abuses of the oil industry. Oil Change International was founded in 2005 and was one of the organizations that was inspired by the strength and the sacrifice of the Ogoni Nine. And in particular, in the way that it affected Oil Change International's founder, Steve Kretzman, who's going to be moderating our panel today. In fact, one of Oil Change's first efforts was an anniversary tour with Ken Saro-Wiwa's son to commemorate 10 years following the murder of the Ogoni Nine. And Oil Change is now known for fighting the oil and gas industry, most of the time for talk about climate change, but actually for 20 years, Oil Change has fought the oil industry first and foremost because of the impact it's had on communities, pollution of air and water, human rights abuses, economic impacts, violence, and corruption. We're really lucky to have with us today some incredible activist leaders. We are still waiting for some connectivity issues, but we have with us Nimo Bassi from the Health of Mother Earth Foundation, and we hope to have Okun of the Kebet Women Development and Resource Center, and Desmond Dessa of South Durban Community Environmental Alliance here with us today. And for the next little while, we're going to hear more about the Ogoni Nine. We'll view an excerpt of the documentary that Oil Change International produced to commemorate the 30th anniversary of their murder. We will then hear from this group of activists discussing the legacy of this event, how it impacted them, the work that they've been doing since, and the important work that they're doing today. And then we'll have some time for question and answer with the speakers and panelists. So please put your questions and answers, or put your questions in the chat in the webinar, and we will get to as many of those after the panel as we can. So let's move into our program. I would like to welcome Nimo Bassi to kick us off. Nimo is a Nigerian architect, environmentalist, activist, author, and poet who's chaired Friends of the Earth International from 2008 to 2012. He's currently the head of Health of Mother Earth Foundation, which is an ecological think tank and advocacy organization. He's won a huge amount of awards, Time Magazine's Hero of the Environment, Right Livelihood, Rafto Prize, and others. And most importantly for Oil Change, he's been on our board since 2021, and he's been an invaluable resource to our work, particularly in Africa and the Global South. Nimo is going to start us off with a reading.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and welcome everyone to this very important meeting. In planning for the meeting, I really thought about what I would read, and I thought I should read the last poems that Ken Saro-Wiwa wrote while in prison before he was executed. All these poems are captured in the book, Silence Will Be Treason. The first poem I want to read is just 5 lines called Fire. There is a fire in me, burns all night and day, flares at injustice, leaps at oppression, glows warmly in beauty. The next one is titled Victory Song. And it goes, you have raped my land, black brother, silenced my song upon my wholesome breath. Condemned to a gas dungeon, I suffocate, shriek in pain, into cold, stone-stuffed ears. Your fingers drip with my blood, staining your nails black and crude. Vampire, tyrant, rapist, black brother of the same womb, but cruel as the flames that burn, poisonous gases into our skies. I lie, manacled in chain, in caves of your callous care, but the day will come when I'll break your hard bones with my claws, tear your brain, consume you in a wrathful fire. To the wild winds expose you, paint the cruel marks of your sin on the walls of history. Then shall I, triumphant, return to our hapless mother with bright bouquets of peace. That was both sad and hopeful and defiant at the same time. Then this poem is titled Ogoni, Ogoni. Ogoni is the land, the people, Ogoni, the agony of trees dying in ancestral farmlands, streams polluted, weeping, filled into murky rivers. It is the poisoned air causing the luckless lungs of dying children. Ogoni is the dream, breaking the looping chain around the drooping neck of a shell-shocked land. Now, Kesawiwa was facing a very horrendous trial. It was clear there would be no justice. But even while he wrote some very dark and difficult to read poems, he also really had a lot. His humor, his sense of humor never failed for one day. And I read this one titled, I Lie Alone at Night. I lie alone at night and think all of 1 year's gone since I held you in my arms in the bed we know so well. I lie alone at night and see the callous bandits break into our hallowed bedroom, cruelly knife our togetherness. I lie alone at night and think of you lying lonely, dreaming of my return to the home we love so well. I lie alone at night and think of the thick boots which stalk the halls of tyranny and crush us underfoot. I lie alone at night and wonder why you wait and endure the gripping pain, which is my lot to bear. I lie alone at night and think of the stranger moon, the stars beyond my gaze, your beauty like moons and stars. I lie alone at night and pray the day will come to mend your broken heart and steal my breaking soul. I lie alone at night and dream a great new dawn without boots and knives, broken hearts, breaking souls, empty dreams, and lonely beds, stranger moons, and searing pain when you and I and all of us can hold hands and sing our love into a night captured by peace. This was written 5 months before he was executed. You could see he was really hoping that he would get out of the dungeon, but at the same time, he was ready, whatever may happen. He wrote 2 other poems that are rather funny about the military dictator who was in power just before the maximum ruler who executed Kensawiwa. That was General Babangida, the military president of Nigeria. And these poems are titled Babangidans. A little to the right, a little to the left. Watch your step, shake your waist. Dance to time, watch your tilt. Don't be slow, don't be fast. Sing a song, Watch its lyrics. A little to the left, a little to the right. A bit of that, a bit of this. Bite a bit, but don't be beat. Don't dance, don't demand what it is. Makes Babangida such a hit. Part two, a little to the left, and nothing can be right. One step forward and five backward. And stand at ease, Babangida. He wrote this poem for one of his daughters who is still carrying on with the struggle. And I'll end this first reading at this poem because they were, Case Ariwa had a number of hopes and things that he thought he could do that he did not do. For example, he worried about the leadership of the organization he led after he would have been gone. But this one was a poem for his daughter, Zina. I have raised the questions, daughter, which you and your kids must ponder. I feel guilty I did not sooner, in my lifetime, urge them stronger. And now, before I answers provide, I may in cold blood lie buried. Have our futures compromised? I hand back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Nemo. What a wonderful way to begin this webinar. I would like to now introduce Andy Rowell, who has been with Oil Change since the organization's founding in 2005. For a long time, Andy was with us as part-time editor of the Price of Oil blog, and a few years ago, Andy joined as a senior communications and research staff, and he has a background in investigative journalism, has focused on exposing bad actions of corporations, and has written about the environment and the oil industry for 30 years, including books The Next Gulf and Green Backlash. And Andy was a key piece of this documentary, Shell Shocked Land, which we'll see an excerpt from today. So Andy, please introduce the documentary.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I mean, why make a film now? Why make a documentary now about the Ogoni 9 30 years later? And at the end of the film, we quote the Czech novelist Milan Kundera, who once wrote that the struggle of humanity against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. And as we say in the film, remembering is a key part of resistance against the oil industry. But it is also more than that. So although it's 30 years since the murder of Ken and the Ogoni 9, and we do need to remember their struggle, the fight for justice in the Niger Delta is as relevant as it has ever been, and the Ogoni struggle is as relevant now as it was back in the early 90s and mid-90s. And it still has huge national and international ramifications. The Ogoni are still fighting for compensation. They're fighting for cleanup and exoneration for Ken Saro-Wiwa and the other Ogoni 9. You know, and last year Shell pulled out of onshore the Niger Delta, trying to avoid liability and paying compensation for decades of ecological destruction. And if Shell is allowed to get away with it in Nigeria, other companies will follow suit, following the same playbook across the globe. Meanwhile, the communities are still fighting Shell in the courts, and Nigeria's president is pushing to resume oil operations, despite the communities saying no. And someone put in the chat about the Remember Saro-Wiwa battle bus, that, you know, even now, the authorities refuse to release that. It's been sitting in Lagos port for 10 years. Why now are they still so afraid of a bit of artwork made by Sakari Douglas Camp? So why are they so afraid of a rusting bit of metal? So it is a really live issue, and we try and address many of these things in the film. As Ken's final words were, "Lord, take my soul," but the struggle continues. So 30 years later, we argue the struggle is more urgent than ever, and that is why we made the film. Thank you.
I was born in Nigeria, but I grew up in England. And I'd spend my summer holidays in Nigeria. Around 1990, we stopped going because of my father's campaign. He was extremely dedicated to the cause, fighting environmental degradation in the Niger Delta. It became quite all-consuming after a while. And then he was killed when I was 19, and so for a long time I didn't really engage with Nigeria.
On behalf of the entire Ogoniland, its chiefs, people and spirits, and on behalf of the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, first up, I say welcome to our shell-shocked land.
But she can. November 1995. We remember. Truth persists and continues to spread. You can kill the messenger, but she can never kill the message. This is the story of what happens when people fight oil giants. This is the story of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni 9.
He loved Ogoni, and he loved Nigeria. You know, it wasn't just our ethnic group that he wanted to improve, it was everyone. With the oil industry in Nigeria, there's always been prioritizing of profit over people. They have a certain power over the government. An oil company is producing government revenue, and so the government, to some extent, is going to allow those companies to do what they want.
The Niger Delta, Africa's largest delta. Rivers, swamps, mangroves. Rich in oil reserve, it underpins Nigerians' economy. In 1958, Shell began extracting oil from Ogoniland. Shell's operation devastated Ogoni, polluting rivers, farmland, and drinking water. The Ogoni people opposed Shell's operation, blaming them for severe pollution and environmental destruction.
From today onwards, Shell is declared persona non grata in Ogoni.
Declaring Shell unwelcome, they faced violent repression by Nigeria's military regime. Thousands were later murdered or tortured, with evidence later emerging that Shell colluded with the military regime. The Ogoni were activists, with Ken the head of the movement for the survival of Ogoni people. Ken Saro-Wiwa, Saturday Dobe, Nodu Ewo, Daniel Boko, Paul Lebura, Felix Nuate, Baribo Bira, Barinim Kyobe, John Oine. The Ogoni demanded environmental cleanup and political autonomy, challenging both the Nigerian government and corporate exploitation. But chicanes in solidarity spread in the US and London.
So in 1993, Andy Rowell, who is still with Oil Change International, he called me up and he said, you have to meet this gentleman from Nigeria. His name is Ken Saro-Wiwa, and he's been organizing in his community in Nigeria to non-violently push the oil industry out of his backyard.
In May 1994, 4 Ogoni chiefs were murdered in the grain conflicts. The government accused Ken and his colleagues of orchestrating the killings, although evidence later emerged that the military was behind the murders. Ken and others were imprisoned, Despite repeated torture, they remained steadfast in the faith and conviction in the justice of the cause. Their incarceration became a testimony for social and environmental justice. Ken wrote, "When the land is ravaged, our pure air poised, when streams choke with pollution, silence would be treason." Amnesty International and others documented severe abuses against those imprisoned. They were locked up, beaten, and denied medical treatment. On November 10, 1995, Ken and 8 fellow activists were executed for leading the Ogoni people's fight against Shell and the government-backed oil exploration. The Ogoniland execution became a defining moment in the global fight for environmental and human rights.
And that moment, that realization of what the oil industry is willing to do to protect its profits, was pivotal for me personally and pivotal for a lot of us. This is not an acceptable cost for energy or an acceptable way to make profit. The idea that eventually became Oil Change International was born.
Great, and that was, again, an excerpt from the short documentary video, Shell Shocked Land. We will send a link following the webinar so you can watch the full short video. Next, I'm going to introduce Tuli Makama, who is Oil Change International's Africa Program Director. She's a public interest environmental lawyer by training and has decades of experience working with communities and civil society organizations in Africa and around the world. In 2010, Tuli was awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize. She now leads OCI's Africa work and to expose the impacts of fossil fuel projects and support a shift to clean energy and energy access. Tuli.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that glamorous introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today to help us mark this momentous 30 years anniversary of an activist who continues to lead and instruct us from beyond the grave. We are really appreciative of the sacrifices that him and the Ogoni 8 made 30 years ago. Mine today is to introduce our moderator for this conversation. And I feel honored to be the one introducing Steve Cressman, who is the founder of OCI, Oil Change International, founded 25 years ago, sorry. And Steve is one of the few remaining activists who actually worked and supported Ken's work that many years ago. And it's worth mentioning that from the experience that him and others saw working with Ken, seeing the devastation in the Niger Delta, and being confronted by the arrogance of the oil industry, and also and also the support they were getting from governments, the government of Nigeria specifically at the time, became inspired to roll up his sleeves and do some more work. And that extra work actually gave birth to what we call Oil Change International today. It's not surprising that the name of Oil Change International is in part said to be the price of oil, because in Oil Change, Steve, that many years ago, set up to focus on the oil industry and the impacts and costs that it visits upon communities and human lives. And so one can ably say that the work that OCI continues to do around environmental justice, human rights, and linking it to governance and democracy falls squarely into the vision that was given to birth by Steve that many years ago. So Steve has been part of a number of networks or movements that work on on protecting our planet. This experience took him to places like Greenpeace, and we also know that Steve was part of Project Underground at some point, and we are told it's during that time actually when him and others assisted to take samples of the pollution that was happening in the Niger Delta and get it out of Nigeria for testing. So we are really honored today to have him with us here at OCI. He is no longer at OCI. He moved on to other ventures, which are still pursuing the cause that he cherishes dearly. So he moved on, and he's here today just to share with us and through moderating the conversation on what the day that we are here about today actually signifies and means for the work that we are doing today. Steve, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. This is quite an occasion. 30 years after Ken and the other 8 Ogoni and the Ogoni 9 were executed, 20 years after Oil Change was founded. 30 years ago, I was working with Greenpeace, actually, and 32 years ago, I was working with Greenpeace when I first heard from Andy, who you saw earlier on the call here, that I should talk to Ken Saro-Wiwa, as you saw in the film, and indeed I did. The world was very different then. We were communicating by fax, by scratchy phone often, particularly phone calls with Nigeria were very, very difficult. And I remember that after having met Ken when he was on what turned out to be his last trip to the United States in early 1994, I was speaking with him in April 1994 from London, and he was holding the memo from Major General Okontimo of the Mobile Police Force that we had gotten a hold of. And the memo was quite clear that the Nigerian military was intending to arrest Ogoni leaders and to commence, quote unquote, wasting operations to reduce the power of the movement that was really putting a stop to Shell and other oil companies in the region. And I remember talking to Ken, and he said to me, "This is it." He looked at the memo. He said, "This is it. They're going to arrest us all and execute us all for Shell." And after I had taken a moment to internalize what it was he was saying, I said, "Well, okay, but of course you're not going back, right? You're going to stay in London. We'll find a way to keep you safe." And he wouldn't hear of it. He was quite clear that he needed to go back to be able to give a face to the struggle that was ongoing there, and to be able to continue to shine a spotlight, which he had done so ably, on the plight of what is ultimately a relatively small ethnic group in the very large country that is Nigeria. And Ken did that very effectively. And at the end of the day, it obviously cost him everything. But that was humbling to a lot of us. And we certainly saw what people were willing to do to stand up for their environmental and human rights. And I think a lot of us, some of us on this call, as you'll hear, and elsewhere, some people that I see in the chat who are with us, who aren't talking, people like Michael Watts and Paul Horseman, who are, Ken's death really changed our lives, because it made it so clear what was going on in terms of people versus profits and polluters. So I'm joined on this panel today by my old friend and colleague Nima Bassi, who you've already heard introduced by Elizabeth, the director of the Health of Mother Earth Foundation. We are also, do we have Desmond Desa or not? So perhaps not. I'm not hearing anything. So maybe, okay, maybe either Tuli or Andy or both of you could stay on to sort of help with this a little bit if Desmond isn't around. And I know MM is also there, who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, but who I know is doing some fantastic work in Nigeria today. She's the executive director of the Quebec. I hope I pronounced that right. I probably did not, and I apologize. But Women's Development and Resource Organization. And she's headquartered in Port Harcourt, which is right in the middle of the Niger Delta. With that, I think, so I mean, I talked a little bit about how this work started for me, right? Those first interactions I had. And I'm wondering, maybe how did you first hear about Cancer-Wiwa? And it must have been something to be growing up with that. I'm sure you heard about that at an early age. Please tell us.
Yeah, I was in Port Harcourt, River State, and I still live in Port Harcourt. As at that time, I just completed my National Youth Service, and where I worked, I had a young man, an Ogoni. Where we worked was a marketing company. And then my brother also had a colleague from Ogoni. So we were quite conversant with the issues of the Ogoni uprisings. And I also followed the story of what the River State Internal Security Task Force, led by then Colonel Paul Okutimo. I followed all the atrocities the task force carried out in Ogoni. And I also remember the day Ken and the other Ogonis were executed. I remember that boy in my office. He took excuse from the office. I really felt bad about everything. And then sometime in the early 2000, I think precisely 2002, a colleague, Sokari Ekine, came down. She used to live in the UK. She came down to the Niger Delta to conduct a survey into sexual violence against Ogoni women during the uprisings of the 1990s in Ogoni, and the stories that emerged from the study was gory stories, scary. A lot of Ogoni women till now still suffer trauma. Some of them testified at the Okuta panel, but then there has been no justice. So I followed through the story. By the time I started working with the Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law in 1997, and I founded the Women's Rights Desk of the Institute, I started engaging with more Ogoni women. I had conversations with Victoria, Caroline Nabo, and some other Ogoni women that then were very active in FOA. FOA is Federation of Ogoni Women Associations. So I believe that I was quite there when everything happened. I felt it as if I was an Ogoni people because I had close associates that are Ogoni people. So I still work with Ogoni women. I feel what they feel and the atrocities committed against the Ogoni people is not just the Ogoni people, it is the entire people in the Niger Delta region. And that is why now it is so painful that while we are celebrating 30 years memorial of the Ogoni 9, that the federal government in Nigeria is considering going back to Ogoni to begin to drill again oil, which is not really oil. It's like going back to drill the blood of the Ogoni people that was shed 30 years ago. So I consider myself, I identify with the Ogoni women because I'm from the Niger Delta. This is atrocity against not only the Ogoni people, the Niger Delta people, and all the indigenous people around the world. So I have been so passionate since I started engaging, sensitizing communities, creating awareness on human rights, women's rights. I have been so passionate about the issues. I have mobilized Ogoni women. I've carried out a lot of activities in Ogoni, even with the issue of resumption of oil. We are still working with Ogoni women to resist the intentions of the federal government of Nigeria to go back and continue the pollution in Ogoni. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's quite a story. Okay, good. Nemo, I'm wondering, from your perspective, how is this moment today different than 30 years ago? What have we achieved, and what do we still struggle with in so many ways? I have my own answers to this question, but we can start with you.
Okay. Well, 30 years is a long time, but we've had to be eternally vigilant about what is going on in Ogoni territory, in Ogoniland, because there's, as just mentioned, there's always been the attempt to reopen the wells, all wells that were shut down in 1993 in Ogoniland. And so the struggle to keep those wells shut down, in fact, to have decommissioning happen there and have a restoration of the environment is something that has been going on continually. But the events of November 10, 1995 have really powered very strong resistance to destructive activities of oil companies and government in Nigeria, and is inspiring our work, not just in Africa, but with other allies around the world. In fact, November 10 has come to be known as the Day of Remembrance of Martyrs of Extractivism. Kesariwa ranks amongst one of those. Now, the day they were executed remains so indelibly in my memory because I was at a conference of the Association of Nigerian Authors, and I was the secretary then. And Kesariwa had been the president of the association up to 1993. And so that day we're spending at the conference, the death sentence had been passed by the tribunal, and we knew it was also, it was totally unjust, uncalled for. And so the debate we had was whether to send a letter of appeal to the president, to the dictator, Abacha, to spare the life of the Ogoni 9, or to condemn the actions of the tribunal. It took almost a whole day debating, and I was really very pained by it. But that's the reality when you work with a lot of people, a lot of writers at that time, who had different opinions about different things and who had different levels of understanding of the issues. But while we're still debating, the news filtered in that he had been executed. And so there was no more need for the debates. That stopped the debates, and it had to send out a very strong denunciation of the act of the dictatorship. Now, since then, we always say that the blood of the martyrs, they fertilize the struggle. but nobody wants that to happen before the struggle gets stronger. But Ken Saro-Wiwa left a lot behind. His writings, his organizational approaches, and this has been like the learning tool for young people over the years. And I think his footprints are very, very indelible. And this, what he did and what he said, that you can kill the messenger, you never kill the ideas, you never kill the stop the struggle, is still what is firing the movements today. And so I think to a large extent, that is a big success for him. Unfortunately, he lost his life, but we are gaining from that sacrifice.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, it's so clear that the sacrifice that Ken and the Ogoni made sparked a global wave of outrage at the fossil fuel industry. And that wave continues to build. Just today, I was looking at a press conference from Belém, where we have some 60 odd countries talking about the need to transition away from fossil fuels. Remember, it's been very hard in these climate negotiations to even get them to mention the major cause of climate change, which is fossil fuels. And so, a lot of us that were inspired by Ken have been involved in pushing that forward. And a lot of people on this call and in this organization have, and all of our organizations have certainly been doing that. Andy, I wonder if you wanted to add anything at this stage, since we don't have Des.
Let's go back. I mean, what has changed? I mean, I think what I suppose what is really shocking right now is that, we're 30 years later, and this has become a multi-generational, struggle for justice. As Nemo says, a lot of people are inspired by Ken, but I mean the fight for justice has been taken on by the new generation. We're still, they're still fighting Shell in the courts. Shell is trying to avoid responsibility. It's trying to sort of run away and from cleaning up. Talking to some of the lawyers about some of the documents that have come out in some of the recent court cases or the recent court case in London about, just really explosive documents about Shell and how it was trying to run away from paying for the cleanup. Nothing's changed. I mean, Shell's always seen it as a PR problem. It's always put profit over people. It could have paid up, it could have cleaned up, but it's instead it's tried to run away. So and to add salt into the wounds, they're talking about resuming oil drilling in Ogoni, which can only right now add to more problems and conflicts without proper cleanup, without compensation, without exoneration for the Ogoni 9, and without total consultation with Ogoni about the way forward. So, we're 30 years later, but many of the issues are still the same.
Yeah, indeed. MM, you were trying to jump in there for a second? I think we're just trying to talk. Yeah, you there? Sorry. I think we're just trying to talk a little bit about, how things have changed in the last 30 years and the strategic situation we find ourselves in today, which, on the one hand, knowledge of what the fossil fuel industry has been doing around the world is much more widespread. And yet the costs are also still quite great. And the political power that we're all trying to bring to bear is growing as well. And so, from my perspective, 30 years ago, we would say the barriers to getting rid of oil and gas are political, not technical. And 30 years ago, that might not have been a fully honest thing because we didn't really have the technology. But we certainly have the technology now. And so the question are, what are the political barriers that we are coming up against that continue to stymie a transition away from oil and gas? And I thought that you were trying to jump in, but yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, what's the question, please?
The question really is, how are things different today than they were 30 years ago, and what hope do you have for the future? What are you focusing on that you want to share with people as we move forward?
Yeah, what is different today than 30 years ago is that there is increased awareness among more communities in the Niger Delta region about the insincerity of the Nigerian government and the corporations, and many people are rising up to challenge oppression and the destruction of the environment. Particularly, many women are questioning what is going on, resisting the corporations. The voices of women are much more amplified. The activities of women to achieve environmental justice is much more visible, and the women are very committed to ensuring that the Niger Delta people get justice. The women are more organized. Women organizations are strengthened and are becoming stronger and stronger every day. And that even though the cleanup process in Ogoni is not what it is expected, but at least there is an action going on in the name of cleanup. Some actions are being taken to remediate the environment, though the government is also trying to destroy that by making effort to reintroduce resumption of oil extraction in Ogoni. But the people are stronger, the people are much more aware. We have also been able to build international solidarity and networks, and there are spaces at the international level that this story is being told. More support has been mobilized, but I would say that we still need much to be done to support the women. Though the women are much more organized, and the women's movement for environmental justice in the Niger Delta is becoming stronger and stronger, we need more opportunities for the women to strengthen capacity and also information sharing. And we also need more resources because the community-based groups are not having access to resources to carry out more of the actions that they will want to carry out. So that is the situation now. We need to strengthen the networks. We need to strengthen access to resources and also access to the government stakeholders. We had Women Climate Assembly even before I came to Belém. We need to have the access to push forward the declaration into the circles of government and where decisions can be taken to influence change. And also, in Belém, we had the plan that we will mobilize more women to come for the COP and also speak about the situation in the Niger Delta. We actually plan with Comrade Celestine to have a big action at the COP30 to mark this 30th anniversary. But we could not achieve that because of lack of adequate resources. So that is the situation now. We need more encouragement. We need more empowerment. We need to build a stronger solidarity at all levels.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because even as our strength has grown, unfortunately, so has the fossil fuel industry, and on a lot of different fronts as well. And they've partnered with a lot of repressive regimes, including in the United States now. So it's quite sobering how these powers continue to develop. Nemo, did you want to jump in on this at some stage?
Absolutely. And thanks to Eben for what you just presented. 30 years down the road, a number of things have changed. One is that we had a report, the assessment of Ogoni environment by the United Nations Environment Program, which was published in 2011. Before then, what we could hold up against the system was the Ogoni Bill of Rights, which the movement for the survival of Ogoni people under Ken Saro-Wiwa presented to the then military dictatorship in 1990. And that document has not been responded to by the government, even as we speak, but it's a very big organizing tool. But then we have the UNEP report, which showed that every complaint by Ken Saro-Wiwa and the other Ogoni leaders, that they were all correct, they were all on target. All the water bodies in Ogoniland are polluted. The land polluted, some places to a depth of 5-10 meters. And of course, the air is contaminated. If you get to some of the communities, because of the level of pollution, you will develop a headache within a few minutes of getting there. But people live right there. And so life has become very, very brutish and short in the area. And then in 2023, we had another report from another state in the Niger Delta. It's called Environmental Genocide by the Bayelsa State Oil and Environment Commission. And that report shows that there's a per capita oil pollution of about 1.5 barrels of crude oil in that particular state, which I think is representative of the entire Niger Delta, because we have on the average 300 oil spills every year. So it's enormous. It's just it's something that one cannot really explain. It's better experience, or better not to experience it, but experiencing is the only way to really understand it. Now the commission submitted that report, and the report is with the government, but the commission has been disbanded and is now constituted into an international working group on cleaning up the region, the state. And so the struggle now is to get the governments to set up a Bayelsa State and others to carry out a Niger Delta-wide environmental assessment and health impact assessment, so that we can actually have the concrete tools, concrete data to begin the work. And they need to set up the campaign to set up a remediation fund and a restoration fund, because remediation is not all that is needed. There must be remediation, there must be restoration, and this could take a lifetime or even 2 lifetimes, and there must be reparation. But on our part, we're working with Ogoni activists and others, as well as internationally, to leverage on the campaigns of the Ogoni people, the successes, keeping the oil in the ground for 32 years, despite all the efforts of Shell and the government to open the wells, as well as the efforts of the Yasuni people, the people of Ecuador, who voted in 2023, 60% of the votes in the referendum to keep the oil in the ground, and also voted a couple of days back to stop the government from reviewing the constitution, which has provisions that really protects the environment. And so we're calling this campaign Ogonize. We take the Ogoni to change Ogoni to an action verb, an action word. To Ogonize, meaning communities must take the lead in decisions about what happens in the environment. And this fits very much into the shift towards keeping fossil fuels in the ground. And then to Yasunize, which means learn from the Ecuadorian people, and let's globalize the struggle. So this is what I see is one of the pathways forward, going forward, to Ogonize and to Yasunize. And we need much more research, as I said, about what is going on, what kind of situation are we living in. And Oil Change International is very, very good in, the kind of research that you come up with is incredible. And we would like to see some of that zeroed in the areas that we work. And also in the other areas, I recognize the work of the attack on the deltas in Africa, which really, all the deltas in Africa, the citizens, the indigenous people can find Ogoniland, the Niger Delta, as a learning laboratory. We need to bring more people to see what can go wrong so that we can stop those things from being replicated across the continent, as well as in Southeast Asia, the Pacific, and also in Latin America, and also in the global north areas, global south areas in the global north, including the United States.
I love that Ogoni's. It also does a really nice honor to something I don't hear a lot about, which is just what an incredible organizing feat it was to get 3/5 of the Ogoni population out on January 4th, 1993. I mean, when you think about 3/5 of any group, that's quite sobering in terms of how successful and how skillful the Ogoni organizers and Ken and everyone around him was at the time. So I think we have a chance to go to some questions now, for which I think I'm going to hand it back to Elizabeth. Yes.
Yes. So we have a few questions in the chat and in the Q&A. Maybe we could start with from Susu Coach. There are a couple questions on Shell. So what is the level of engagement that Shell has still ongoing in Nigeria? That there's some recent news about gas offshore drilling, and is it any better than it has been before? And then also a question about the case that Milieu Defensie brought against Shell in the Netherlands on carbon reduction, and if there's any new development on this.
Can I jump into that? Okay, what's the current situation about what is Shell doing in Nigeria? This is a very good question, very important at this time. Now, there's been a spate of so-called divestment by international oil companies working in Nigeria. They're selling off their assets, onshore assets in the communities, to Nigerian entities. And we believe that this is a way to avoid responsibility and to sever the link between the legacy of pollution that they've left in the region, and just hand that over to the new players, and claim that they have nothing to do with all the damage that they've done over a period of 7 decades in the Niger Delta. So Shell handed over or sold to a company called Renaissance, and we've heard that they actually gave that company the chunk of the money that they needed to use to purchase from Shell. So Shell, the seller, gave money to the buyer, and that really says a lot. And so we are left with a whole lot of harm that Shell inflicted on the region. And this so-called divestment is being challenged in the law courts in Nigeria, and we're hoping that they will be held to account to clean up the mess before they move out to anywhere at all. So that's the challenge we're having right now, the so-called divestment and ongoing oil spills from the abandoned oil wells that were never decommissioned or cleaned up.
Maybe a quick follow-up question to that from Mark and Alice Imlay. How are we restoring the environment in Nigeria? I know there's a lot of continued threats, but are there some hopeful pieces as well?
I was hoping I would jump in to respond to that. I'm not sure I got the question very well, but it's about the state of the cleanup in Ogoniland, which was referenced by them earlier on. The cleanup followed the publication of the UNEP report on the environment, and actually began in about 2017, I think. They classified the polluted areas into simple areas, medium, and then complex. So they've not gone to the complex locations. And those are locations, areas where groundwater is contaminated, and very swampy areas with very, very extensive pollution that will take a lot of skills and a lot of time and resources to clean up. So it's a slow process, and it's just inching forward, and we're hoping that it just become political cleanup and that it actually happens. So there's pressure to make that happen, to ensure that it's done the way it should be done. But All that would never have happened had Ken Saro-Wiwa not blown the whistle against Shell's atrocities in Ogoniland. So that's a legacy response, and we mark that down as a big achievement. And one of the achievements of this hero and the other leaders who stood up against Shell and the system.
Yeah, thanks for that. Maybe with this last question might be for, maybe we could go back to all the panelists and sort of use this. Maybe we just got another one too, but let's see. We've got another question about any hope on UK trials or ongoing European legal channels. And then I will wrap up with a broader question. I don't know if anyone's been following some of the legal cases more closely.
I mean, on the UK legal cases, the Shell has just been in court. They've just been had a few days of hearings, and I think from memory, I think there is a trial date set for May 2027, and at the moment that is going ahead, and that is for the Bile and Ogali pollution cases. So yeah, I mean, so that's ongoing. And at the Dutch case about CO2 emissions, they won, Shell appealed, and I think my understanding is it's going to the Dutch Supreme Court with a ruling next year sometime. I don't know when next year.
Thanks, Sandy. Maybe we could just go through with MM and Nemo and Steve and Andy and Tuli if you want to. There's a question about how do we unite our movements and actions worldwide to ensure our concerns are taken into account. MM, do you want to take that? Maybe not. Maybe MM's not available. Nemo, would you like to? Oh, there you go. Hey, MM.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe just, yeah, how do you see going forward? How do we unite our movements and take action now?
Yeah, it is very important to build linkages between what we are doing at the local level in Nigeria and what is going on at the international level. And let me add something briefly to what Comrade Nemo said before. He mentioned the UNEP report and the report of the Bayelsa Commission. Let me also add that Kebekase conducted a scientific study in Otuabagi, where we collected blood samples of 80 women. All of them have, from the test results, all of them have hydrocarbon in their blood. And I want to believe that this is what is happening to all of us in the Niger Delta. Comrade Nemo had also said that there should be more studies. So there should be more studies. And we can build collaboration around this area because some of the organizations do not have adequate capacity in this area. And also there is need for a lot of resources to carry out some of the actions. So it is important for more support to some of the smaller groups in the Niger Delta, particularly women groups. I will say that we don't have many women groups. We have so many women's rights organizations in the Niger Delta, but Kebekase is trying to pull other women's rights organizations to be part of the environmental justice movement. Because in the Niger Delta, every issue that we work on has intersection with the environment. So it is important for that support to create that linkages and expand the environmental rights movement. And the ecofeminist movement also need a lot of support. Opportunities for training, opportunities for telling stories, opportunities to access resources, and also to learn innovative advocacy strategies from other countries that are experiencing similar issues that we have in the Delta. So as I said before, it is important to strengthen the solidarity. If you have activities in your countries, please extend the invitation to women and youth. Particularly the young women need to be encouraged in the Niger Delta. Not just me. I need more of myself and more of the female environmental activists in the Niger Delta. We need more women. We need to ensure that the voices of the women are stronger. So to me, this is one of the ways we can unite the struggles. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Maybe we'll see. Can I ask Nemo and Steve if you have some last words, and then we'll close.
Yes, I think the documentary that OCI has produced that we just watched a fragment of is the kind of thing that we need to really build the movement. We need that too. And one of the things we need, especially with younger people. 30 years, many of the young activists were not born then. They don't have, we can feel the pain of the executions, of the injustice done by the governments and the oil corporations. But to some of the younger activists, it's just a story. The impact is not the same. So the compulsion to do something may not be at the same degree. So by placing this kind of resource in front of everyone, we are certainly going to stir up understanding, stir up knowledge, and get more people to dig into this situation. So I think a graphic that we need to really work on is the young people, besides the women that I mentioned. We need to, and this is not an accident. The old people have been sacrificed by oil pollution in the Niger Delta, for example, and this could happen in other areas where such destructive extractivism is allowed to go on. So there's big need to empower the young people, the youths, through the kind of medium, social media, documentaries, short clips, animations, so that they really get to see that the struggle of 30 years ago is still very much alive. And the challenges of 30 years ago are even things that may keep on happening if we don't all join together to fight against this. So it's very important to build international collaborations, because if we just stay in our corner to campaign, people say a dancer never knows how well he or she is dancing, except for the spectators who watch how the back or her back moves. So that's really how to know you're dancing well. Somebody has to tell you, yeah, you are doing well. So we need to get more people into the field and more people into the struggles.
Thanks, Nemo. Steve, any last words?
Not much really, except just to echo the idea that, this really is a multi-generational fight, as we know now. And the power that the industry has is quite well backed up and growing on a variety of fronts, but so is ours. And I think we need to continue to sort of engage in cathedral thinking to try to build our resistance and our power over generations to actually eventually create the new world that we all know that we want, where environmental and human rights matter more than profits. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Great. And we'll just close us out with, I wanted to share a bit more about the organizations that we have on our panel. Unfortunately, Des wasn't able to join us, but just a shout out to Health of Mother Earth Foundation, which is Nemo's organization. You can find out more at homef.org. Kebekatsi Women Development and Resource Center that leads is working in Nigeria on women's rights and environmental justice. Kebekatsi womencenter.com, and then South Durban Community Environmental Alliance, also an organization that was sort of inspired by the fights of the Ogoni 9 and is celebrating 20 years this year as well. sdcea.co.za if you don't know about that. And then just to thank you all for joining us and being with us today. Our next slide just it gives you a way to contribute to Oil Change. If you're so moved, we really appreciate the support of Oil Change and our partners. We're grateful to be in this fight with you and the organizations you've heard from today. And we hope we can count on your support moving forward. There's information on the slide to do that today. We're also starting our year-end fundraising campaign, so you will hear from us if you are on our list, which we hope you are. I'm just gonna hand it over to Nemo to close out with one final reading and send us off. Thank you again all so much for joining us today, and really appreciate your participation, great questions, and yeah, Nemo.
I'll read 3 short poems written by Ken Saro-Wiwa, of course, in his last days, and then I'll read a fragment of a poem I wrote as a response to direct climate actions by young people in the Niger Delta that was met with a military assault on young people. Now, these 3 poems, one is called The Town Crier, the other one, The Call, and then the last one is Keep Out of Prison. The Town Crier. Town Crier. Take these cuffs from my legs and set me free. Pick the lies from your teeth and let me be. Town crier, proud gong, calling the lame and deaf to defend their blasted land. The call. Hear the call of the ravaged land, the raucous cry of famished earth, the full dash of the poisoned air, the piteous well of sloshed streams. Here, oh here, stunted crops fast decay, fishes die and float away, butterflies lose wing and fall, nature succumbs to the ecological war. And this final poem I'm going to read is titled Keep Out of Prison, which was the advice that Ken was getting when he was in prison. Say, keep out of prison, he wrote. Don't get arrested anymore. But while the land is ravaged and our pure air poisoned, when streams choke with pollution, silence would be treason, punishable by a term in prison. This is such a very heavy poem with a touch of humor in it. Silence will be treason, and that's why we are not silent. My own poem, I'm going to read a fragment of it. We thought it was oil, but it was blood. Was partly inspired by the environmental leadership of Ken Saro-Wiwa. The other day, we danced in the street. Joy in our hearts, we thought we were free. 3 young folks fell to our right. Countless more fell to our left. Looking up, far from the crowd, we beheld red-hot guns. We thought it was oil, but it was blood. We thought it was oil, but it was blood. Heart jumping into our mouths, floating on emotional dry wells. We leapt in fury, but it wasn't funny. Then we beheld bright red guns. Thought it was oil, but it was blood. Thought it was oil, but it was blood. First, it was the Ogonis. Today, it is the Jaws. Who will be killed this next day? We see open mouths. We hear no screams. Tears don't flow when you are scarred. We stand in pools up to our knees. We thought it was oil, but it was blood. We thought it was oil, but it was blood. They may kill all, but the blood will speak. They may gain all, but the soil will rise. We may die and yet stay alive. Placed on the slab, slaughtered by the day, we are the living, long sacrifice. We thought it was oil, but it was blood. Thank you so very much.